It took him almost 70 NHL games, but he finally scored his first NHL goal this season. That's right, today we're talking all about Liam Foudy, what we liked, what we didn't like, and what we want to see from him next year.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We are over on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit the little bell button below to know when episodes go live. I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And let's just get right into it, because I actually went back and re-listened to last year's version of this, which was not ideal. But today we're talking about Liam Foudy, who, like I said at the top of the show, finally scored his first NHL goal. He's kind of had a rough career up to this point. He had 14 points in 62 games this season. But I'm okay with Liam Foudy taking a minute to get to where he needs to go, which might seem strange considering how high on him I've been. But I don't know. It feels like he is doing all of the right things, and it's just not working for whatever reason. Whether that's line mates, whether that's ice time, whether that's the fact that he had played one NHL game last season, and I feel like he didn't play a ton of AHL games either. Last season was a weird one for him. He played 29 AHL games last season for Cleveland, one Blue Jackets game in the NHL. So, since leaving the London Knights, he played 2 games for the Blue Jackets in the regular season and then 10 playoff games, 24 games the next season for the NHL, and then 12 in the AHL, 1 NHL game last season, 29 in the AHL. So, honestly, put together, he played more games this season than he played in his previous 3 seasons, which feels wild. But I thought I don't say I thought he had a good season, because I feel like that's not necessarily true. He averaged, by the way, we're going to get into a little bit more detail in a bit, but 14 points in 62 games. He averaged 12 minutes of ice time a night. So I don't know, man. That's about what I expected. It's been tough for him. Like I said, ice time, line mates. I like his game. It's not getting the results that it needs, I think, which is probably frustrating for him. It's frustrating to watch. I know a lot of people have kind of talked a little bit about how he's a bust, I guess, which seems silly because he's 23 years old. And I feel like you don't get to call people busts until they are at least 25, if then. So his most consistent line mates this season were Eric Robinson and Sean Corrali. They played 43 minutes in total. That was his most consistent line mate. Next, that's at 5-on-5, by the way. This only includes games where lines put together for 2 or more 5v5 face-offs. He's actually only on this list twice, I think. Oh no, he's on for a couple more. Hang on, let me organize this properly. Okay. Scratch all that. His most consistent line mates were Sean Corrali and Mathieu Olivier, who had 100 minutes together. That's not a lot. That's quarter of the amount of time that Robinson, Crowley, and Olivier, the biggest line on the ice, were together. After that, it drops all the way down to the 43 minutes with Robinson and Crowley. So, like, what's he supposed to do? And this has been a thing kind of throughout. I think it's going to continue to be a thing throughout these season reviews. Is how do you expect a guy to develop and get consistency from him if you're not giving him consistency from a coaching point of view? And this is not a stab at Brad Larson necessarily, because this is a problem with a lot of NHL coaches, I think, especially with young players. It's they try them out in a bunch of different places. And I get that to an extent. I get, seeing where they're most effective, seeing what you get from them at different places. But the kid's into his fourth NHL season now. He played more NHL games than a bunch of the regulars. Like, he was 11th on the team in games played. Only 10 players played more games than him this season. So, like, for better or worse, this is who Liam Foudy is on the Blue Jackets right now. I think he can be better, and I think the team can do better for him. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. First, I've got to let you know all about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts or accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, all your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you're back in that game in no time. It's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to US customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. So let's talk about the team being better for him. And the fact of the matter is, I think Liam Foudy is a better player than what he has shown us so far. I don't think that's too out of the box in terms of hot takes. I don't think that's too hot a take, if you'll allow me to have an opinion. That's this whole thing is me having an opinion and you guys listening to it. But I have been high on Foudy basically since they drafted him. I think he's been not a disappointment, but I think he's taken longer to get to where he needs to be than a lot of people expected. He didn't have great possession numbers this season. He was shooting at 10%, which is fine, but could be better. He was a minus 26. He did only take 8 penalty minutes so like 4 minor penalties the entire season, which is pretty darn good, I think. Especially if he spent a bunch of time on a checking line. And maybe this is false. Maybe this is just because of my experience of the Robinson, Corrali, Olivier line. Checking lines tend to take more penalties than not. I would love to know his penalty differential if I can dig that out, actually. But I don't think I can. In terms of, here we go, penalties drawn. He drew 9 and took 4, so he had a penalty differential of +5. That's honestly pretty good. He's drawing almost twice as many penalties as he's taking. Like, that's a small sample size, but I'm going to count that in the win column as to Liam Foudy. I think he can be a successful penalty killer. He takes doesn't take a lot of penalties. He ends up being on the penalty kill probably a little bit less than he should. He played 68 minutes on the penalty kill this season. Now, by contrast, Sean Corrali played 161. So, but he's getting about on average just over a minute of shorthanded time on ice per game, which is not nothing, but the way the Blue Jackets take penalties, I feel like I would like to see that be higher. I mean, that's the crux of the thing. And I got a pretty funny Twitter comment the other day, I believe from Morgan. So Morgan, if you're listening, I did see that. If you want Corrales to play less minutes and you want Gaudreau to play less minutes, like who's going to play the minutes? And my answer is Liam Foudy. Honestly, I think he deserves more than 12 minutes a game. And here's my thing with Liam Foudy. It is an experiment, but I think give him top 6 ice time to start the season. See what he does with that. If it doesn't work, drop him down. But I don't think Liam Foudy is a top line talent, but I think he could be very successful in the middle 6, or he could be incredibly successful on the 4th line. But I figure you start him at the ceiling and move him down. And like that's maybe a backwards way to think about things. I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, let's put him in at the bottom and then work our way up. No, I think you put him in at the deep end and let him try and swim. And if he can't swim, move him to the shallow end. I don't know if that's a backwards way of coaching or what, but I think that the team needs to give Liam Foudy every chance to succeed, because at the end of the day, sure, he has to do it. He has to do it himself. This is not me suggesting that the team should just hand him top line minutes and expect him to and just without reservation, without without telling him that hey, if you do this, and we'll see what happens, instead of just putting him on the top line and then refusing to do anything about it if he's, struggling a little bit. That's not what I'm saying. But the team needs to put all of their players in a position to succeed. Because if they don't, I feel like there's this thing in the NHL where you have to succeed through adversity or it doesn't count. And this is kind of a thing that we've seen with expansion teams. People get real mad at Vegas for being good immediately. People are mad at Seattle for being in the playoffs in the second season, and they're 3-2 over the reigning champions. So I can see why people are mad, but I don't think that you need to succeed through adversity in this league. I think you can succeed without having to go through, people talk about, oh, they've got to earn their stripes. They've got to, carry the water before they can play on the team and other weird sports metaphors. I think Liam Foudy needs to be sat down, and I think he needs to be told during the offseason, hey, work on this, and this. Work on your skating, work on your shot, work on whatever. Come back. We'll do training camp. I would love to see Liam Foudy get a chance to play on a line with, maybe even Boone Jenner and Emil Bemstrom. I could see that as a pretty good third line. You've got the physicality in Boone, you've got the skill in Foudy, you've got the grit in Jenner, you've got the shot in Bemstrom. It feels like those 3 players feel like a group that could gel well together. And I would love to see them get maybe, 15 minutes of ice time in a game. Is that weird? Is that wild? Who could say? But that's kind of where I'm sitting right now with Liam Foudy. Is he needs to be better, but the team needs to help him out with that. And I think it's a two-way street, and it's not a case of Liam Foudy needs to go away and work on a bunch of stuff and then, come back and start from the bottom. I think he's most of the way there. And maybe this is me being biased because I like Liam Foudy's game a lot, but I do think he's most of the way to being a pretty successful depth NHL guy. I don't ever think he's going to be the guy. I don't ever think he's going to be, a Johnny Gaudreau talent, but I think he could be a very good NHL player. And I think that stings a lot of people because he was drafted 14th overall, 18th overall, and people get really in their feelings about first round picks and whether they should be stars all the time. They're not going to be stars all the time. Once you hit 18, I feel like if you get a solid middle 6 player out of 18th overall, that feels like a success to me. And I've talked to a bunch of stat guys who've kind of had the same conversation and okay, could they have chosen better? Probably. Let's see who went 19th in the 2018 draft, because it's probably going to annoy me. But Liam Foudy, I think, is such an interesting case of who is like what is important to the team being drafted, or to the team drafting a player. And Liam Foudy had all of the pieces that would make the Blue Jackets like him. And I think he can still be a piece of this team. I think he can still be a very effective player in this team. So in terms of who went in the rest of the first round, Jay O'Brien, don't know. Rasmus Kupari for the Kings, Ryan Merkley for the Sharks, he's been traded. Keandre Miller for the New York Rangers, that one could have been interesting. Isaac Lundestrom for the Anaheim Ducks, Philip Johansson for the Wild, Dominic Bock for the Blues, Jacob Bernard-Docker for the Senators, Nicholas Beaudin for the Blackhawks, Nils Lundqvist again for the Rangers, Rasmus Sandin for the Maple Leafs, Joe Veleno from for the Red Wings, and Alexander Alexiev from the Capitals. So there's no one really there that like I'm like, oh man, I wish we'd picked him instead, except maybe Keandre Miller. But frankly, that would just add to the logjam on defense right now. So I'm happy with that Foudy pick. Like if you get into the second round, it starts to get a little bit dicey in terms of you get guys that maybe could have been a little bit better. Jack Drury went 42nd overall, for example. That was actually the Kirill Marchenko draft as well. He went 49th overall. Sean Dursey went 52nd overall. Like I don't know, man. I think I'm okay with where Liam Foudy went in the draft. I'm okay with how he's been playing so far. I'd like to see more from him, but for a 23-year-old that's come back from I believe he had a massive shoulder surgery about this time last year, so that he's playing at all feels pretty good to me. And I suppose I should finish up by giving him a grade. I'm going to give him a B-. Still pretty good. Improvement needed. That feels like a fair grade to give, but I do have a lot of notes on what I want to see him do next season. So he's a player that I'm going to be watching pretty clearly next season through training camp and preseason to kind of see what he's doing, because I talked a lot this episode about kind of the team needs to help him out, but he also needs to help himself out. And I would love to see him come into the training camp, come into preseason and just like tear it up. I would love to see that. And maybe we will, maybe we won't. But even if he doesn't, I don't necessarily think that this is a failure of a draft pick. I could talk for ages about the inherent value of a draft pick. Like, at what point do you stop? Like, why is 32nd so much inherently better than 33rd just because 32nd is a first round draft pick and 33rd is a second? That might be something that I come to down the line when it's the summer and there's no hockey happening and I've done all my player reviews and the draft has happened and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of all I've got for you today. No episode tomorrow because it's Saturday. Monday, we will hopefully have some prospect stuff for you. We'll be checking in on the CHL. We'll have a couple more draft profiles. We're going to be prospect heavy next week. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the podcast at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day, even though I'm recording this at 9:06 p.m. my time. Maybe it is your first listen of the day. Maybe you've just turned YouTube on. I don't know. But every day is. I appreciate you. If you're new, I appreciate you as well. If you feel like becoming an everydayer, then we're available everywhere you could think of to find a podcast. We're available on YouTube. Hit subscribe. We just hit a milestone, so we're on our way to the next milestone, which is super exciting for me personally. Hit the little bell button below, then you can subscribe, and it will basically give you little notifications for when the next episode goes live. Thank you once again for listening. Enjoy your weekend, and until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.